She was 5 years old, barefoot on a cold Seoul sidewalk, and she walked right up to the most dangerous man in the city and asked him a question that would change both their lives forever. Nobody does that. Nobody walks up to Jang Kang and speaks. Not his enemies, not his business rivals, not even the men who owe him money and fear him like they fear God. But this tiny girl, with her dark brown skin, her big, curious eyes, and 2 messy puffs of hair coming undone on either side of her head. She looked straight up at him with all the fearlessness of someone who had no idea what fear even was, tugged on the sleeve of his designer coat, and said in her small, serious voice, "Mister, do you want me?" Kang stopped walking. His 2 bodyguards froze. His driver, already holding the car door open, went completely still. The entire street seemed to hold its breath, and Jang Kang, chairman of the Jang Group, silent head of the most powerful underground network in South Korea, a man who had never flinched at anything in his life, felt something crack open in the center of his chest that he didn't have a name for. He looked down at the child. Then he looked up, scanning the street, because surely someone was coming for her. Surely someone was watching. But the evening crowd moved around them like water around stone. Nobody stopping, nobody looking twice at the little girl standing alone in the cold. "Where is your mother?" he asked, his voice low and careful. The child tilted her head. "She's sleeping. She won't wake up." Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand what that moment meant, you have to understand who these people were before fate pushed them together on that cold Seoul sidewalk. Michelle Okafor had not planned to end up in South Korea. She had not planned most of the things that happened to her life. She had grown up in Lagos with big dreams and a bigger heart. The kind of woman who laughed loudly and loved deeply and believed, truly believed, that if she worked hard enough, the world would eventually be fair to her. She studied international business, graduated with honors, got a job with a trading company that promised her the world. Then the company folded. Then her mother got sick. Then the man she thought she was going to marry looked her in the eyes one afternoon and said he was sorry, but he had found someone easier to love. Michelle didn't break. That was the thing about her. She bent, she bowed under the weight, she cried until she couldn't breathe, but she never broke. She packed 2 suitcases, took the last of her savings, and followed a job opportunity to Seoul that a friend of a friend had told her about. It was legitimate, mostly. Administrative work for an import company. Enough money to send something home each month. Enough to survive. And for 3 years, survive is exactly what she did. She had Mirabel 18 months after arriving in Seoul. The father, a man she had trusted more than she should have, disappeared the moment he heard the word, pregnant. And so Michelle became a mother alone in a foreign country, navigating a language she was still learning, working double shifts when she could find them, raising her daughter in a small apartment in Mapo-gu, with thin walls and a heating system that gave up every winter. But Mirabel, oh, Mirabel was something else entirely. Mirabel was her mother's laugh and her mother's stubbornness all wrapped up in a tiny body that radiated warmth like a small sun. She was fearless in the way only children can be fearless, not because she didn't understand danger, but because the world had not yet taught her to be afraid of it. She spoke a hilarious mix of English, Yoruba, and Korean that made strangers on the bus smile without meaning to. She would walk up to anyone, anywhere, and start a conversation. Michelle used to say that God had put an old soul in that little body and forgotten to lock the door. On the evening everything changed, Michelle had collapsed. She had been fighting a fever for 3 days, refusing to stop working because she couldn't afford to. That morning she had dropped Mirabel at the neighborhood community center for the free after-school program. By afternoon, she was burning up in her office bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, telling herself she could make it 1 more hour. She did not make it 1 more hour. She made it 40 more minutes before her legs stopped cooperating, and she went down on the walk home. Right there on the street, and a kind elderly woman called an ambulance. Mirabelle had waited at the community centre until the staff were ready to close. She waited because her mother always came. Her mother always came. But that evening, her mother did not come, and 5-year-old Mirabelle, instead of crying, instead of sitting still, pulled on her little jacket, walked out the door when a staff member's back was turned, and started walking in the direction of home the way she had memorized from watching out the window of her mother's hand. She had been walking for 20 minutes when she saw the man in the long black coat. Jiang Kang was 38 years old and had not felt genuinely surprised by anything in years. He had inherited the Jiang group at 26 when his father died, officially of a heart attack, unofficially of consequences. And he had spent the 12 years since building it into something that officially looked like a luxury real estate and hospitality empire, and unofficially ran half the city's underground economy. He was brilliant. He was ruthless when he needed to be. He had a face that belonged in a museum and a reputation that belonged in a warning. He did not do warm. He did not do soft. He had learned very young that warmth was a vulnerability, and vulnerability was an invitation, and he could not afford invitations. But he looked down at this child who had asked him if he wanted her, and something happened that he could not explain or control. "What do you mean she's sleeping and won't wake up?" he asked, crouching down to the girl's level, his voice deliberately calm. "I tried to wake her this morning and she was too hot," Mirabelle said seriously. "And then when I came back from the centre, she wasn't there, so I was going home to find her, but I think she needs a doctor because she felt like our cooking pot." Kang looked at his head bodyguard, a giant of a man named Oh Song-min, who had served him for 10 years and had seen everything. Sung-min gave him a look that said, "I don't know either, but we can't leave this child here." "What is your name?" Kang asked the girl. "Mirabelle. What's your name?" Nobody asked him his name. He almost smiled. "Kang." "Kang Shi," Mirabelle said carefully, adding the honorific with the precision of a child who had learned Korean from real people. "My mummy is Nigerian. She's very beautiful and very strong, but I think she needs help." He pulled out his phone. Within 3 minutes, he had the location of every hospital that had admitted an adult female in the past 6 hours. Within 5, he had a name. Okafor Michelle. Mapogu District Hospital. Severe dehydration and fever-induced collapse. "Come," he said to Mirabelle, standing up and offering his hand. Mirabelle looked at his hand, then looked up at his face, conducting some private 5-year-old assessment. Then she put her small hand in his very large one and said, "Okay, thank you, Kang Shi." He could not explain, even to himself, why he didn't simply hand the child to Sung-min and have her delivered to the hospital and walk away. He could not explain why he got into that car with her. He told himself it was just practical. It was efficient. He was already heading somewhere in that direction. He told himself a great many things during that car ride, while Mirabelle sat beside him and asked him 27 questions. He counted, about whether he had a dog, why his car smelled nice, whether he had ever eaten jollof rice, and if he thought her mother was going to be okay. "Yes," he said to the last question, and he meant it in a way that surprised him because he was essentially making her a promise, and Jiang Kang did not make promises to strangers. "Good," said Mirabelle, and she leaned her head against his arm and was asleep within 60 seconds. Kang did not move for the rest of the drive. If you're enjoying this story so far, Please hit that like button and subscribe. There are so many more emotional stories like this waiting for you. Michelle woke up to a hospital ceiling and the sound of her daughter's voice. She turned her head and saw Mirabelle sitting in a chair beside the bed, very upright, very serious, holding a juice box and telling someone on the other side of her a story about a time a goat had eaten her grandmother's wrapper in Lagos. Michelle blinked. She shifted her gaze and saw the someone Mirabelle was talking to. He was sitting in the chair like he owned the room, which, she would later learn, he essentially did, since the Jang group had donated the wing they were in. He was tall, even sitting down, broad-shouldered, dressed in all black with the kind of effortless elegance that cost more money than Michelle made in a year. His face was striking, sharp jaw, dark eyes that were watching her daughter with an expression that was not quite soft, but was not quite hard either. It was something in between that she didn't have a word for. "Mummy!" Mirabelle launched herself off the chair. Michelle caught her with the arm that didn't have the IV line. Baby, I'm okay. You fell down," Mirabelle said accusingly. "I know, I'm sorry. Kangxi found me and brought me here." Mirabelle pointed at the man, who had stood up the moment Michelle moved. Up close, he was even more imposing. "He made sure you had the good room." Michelle looked at the man. Then she looked around at the room, which was absolutely not a standard hospital room. Private, clean, a window, an actual sofa. She looked back at him. "I don't understand," she said carefully. Her voice was rough from sleep. "Who are you?" "My name is Jang Kang." He said it simply, like he expected her to recognize it. When she didn't visibly react, something shifted in his expression. Not offense, more like genuine surprise. "Your daughter found me on the street. She said you needed help." Michelle stared at her daughter. "Mirabelle, you talked to a stranger." "He didn't feel like a stranger," Mirabelle said with perfect 5-year-old logic. "That is not—" Michelle stopped, took a breath, looked at the man, Jang Kang, who was watching this exchange with that careful, unreadable expression. "Thank you. Really, thank you for helping her. And for this room. I'll speak to the billing department about transferring to—" "It's handled," he said. "I'm sorry?" "The bill. It's handled." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. Michelle looked at this man she did not know, who had found her child on the street and brought her to the hospital and paid her bill and sat in that chair while her daughter talked his ear off about Lagos goats. And she felt something that was equal parts gratitude and alarm. In her experience, when powerful men did things for you, they always wanted something in return. "I don't accept charity," she said carefully. "With respect." Something moved in his eyes, not irritation, closer to respect. "It's not charity. Your daughter asked me if I wanted her." Michelle blinked. "She what?" "She walked up to me on the street and asked me if I wanted her." A pause. "I'm still trying to understand what she meant by that." Mirabelle, who'd been following this conversation with great interest, said helpfully, "I saw you walking and you looked lonely, so I wanted to know if you wanted a friend or a family, because Mummy says everyone needs a family." The room went very quiet. Michelle watched something move across Jang Kang's face, fast, like a shadow crossing the sun, and then it was gone. But she saw it. She saw the way his jaw tightened slightly and the way he looked away for just a moment, and she understood, in the way that women who have known real pain can always recognize it in others, that this man was carrying something very heavy underneath all that composure. "I'll pay you back," she said, softer now. "Whatever you spent, I will pay you back." He looked back at her. "Rest first," he said, and then, as if he didn't quite trust himself to say anything else, he nodded once, looked at Mirabel, who beamed at him, and walked out of the room. Michelle stared at the closed door for a long time. "Mummy," said Mirabel, "I like him." "You like everyone." "No," Mirabel said very seriously. "I don't like everyone. I like him." He came back the next morning. He told himself he was coming because he needed to confirm the bill was processed correctly. He told himself it was a practical visit. He told Sung Min it was a brief stop, 5 minutes, on the way to a meeting. He stayed for 2 hours. Michelle was sitting up in bed, her hospital food pushed to the side, reading something on her phone and frowning at it. Mirabel was on the floor, conducting some kind of diplomatic negotiation between a toy rabbit she had apparently produced from her school bag and a plastic cup she had turned into a character. She looked up when he came in and said, "Kang-shi!" with the full-body enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting. "You came back," Michelle said. Her voice was not unfriendly exactly, but careful. She was always careful, he would learn. "I wanted to check that the bill was processed correctly," she finished. The look she gave him suggested she didn't entirely believe that. He sat down anyway, because Mirabel was already pulling on his sleeve and pointing to the cup and rabbit situation on the floor and explaining the terms of the peace treaty. And somehow, he found himself sitting on the floor of a hospital room, holding a plastic cup, while a 5-year-old told him his character's name was General Cup, and his job was very important. Michelle watched this from the bed with an expression he couldn't fully read. Later, when Mirabel had fallen asleep on the sofa with her rabbit, they talked. Really talked. Michelle told him about Lagos, about Seoul, about the work she did, about how she managed, about how she was absolutely fine, and this was a temporary setback, and she had a plan. She said the word plan the way people say it when they're desperate for the plan to be real. He listened without interrupting, which surprised her, she admitted. She'd expected him to offer to fix things. Men like him always wanted to fix things. "I don't want to fix anything," he said. "You don't look like someone who needs fixing." She looked at him for a moment. "What do I look like?" He considered this seriously. Someone who is very tired and very proud, and those two things are fighting each other constantly. She opened her mouth, closed it, then, quietly, "That's an uncomfortable amount of perception from someone I met yesterday." "Your daughter talks a lot," he said. "I learned things." Despite everything, she laughed. It came out of her like something that had been waiting for permission, full and genuine and briefly unguarded. He watched it happen with the focused attention of someone seeing a rare thing. "What are you really doing here, Zhang Kang?" she asked when the laugh faded. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm not sure," he said. And that honesty, she would later tell him, was the thing that made her let her guard down, just slightly. Because she had known a great many men who were sure of everything. An uncertain man was something new. She was discharged 2 days later. He sent a car. She called him to say that was unnecessary and she would take the bus. He told her the car was already there and it would be wasteful not to use it. She argued for 4 more minutes, won none of those minutes, and took the car. He did not see her again for 2 weeks. but Mirabel drew him a picture. A tall figure in black, beside a smaller figure with round eyes and a big smile, and she mailed it to the hospital to ask the nurses to give it to the man in the nice suit. And somehow, it reached him. He kept it. He put it on his desk, which was the first personal item on that desk in 12 years. Sung Min noticed. He said nothing. He was a wise man. The next time they met was not planned. Kang was passing through the Mapo district on business, and he saw her. She was outside her building, in work clothes, carrying a bag of groceries and Mirabel's school bag simultaneously, and she had paused to help an elderly neighbour with a heavy box, struggling slightly but refusing to put anything down first. And he watched her for a moment from the car. This woman doing 3 things at once and offering help while she was already full. And he told the driver to stop. "Let me help," he said, appearing at her side. She startled so hard she nearly dropped the groceries. "Do you just appear places?" "My driver was. Jiang Kang, what are you doing in Mapo?" He took the school bag from her shoulder. It was a statement more than an offer. She let him because her shoulder was genuinely burning. They walked up 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. The elevator was broken. It was often broken. And she opened the door to a home that was small and modestly furnished, but so clearly, so entirely hers. Warm colours. Books in 3 languages. Drawings by Mirabel covering one wall like wallpaper. The smell of something spiced in the kitchen from that morning. He stood in the doorway and felt something he hadn't felt since childhood. In the house before everything went wrong. He felt like someone actually lived here. "You can put the bag down," Michelle said, watching him from the kitchen. "Right." He put the bag down. He should leave. "Your wall," he said instead. "The drawings." "Mirabel's gallery. She's very serious about it. Every piece has a title." She tilted her head. "You can look." He walked along the wall slowly. Each drawing had a small piece of tape beneath it with wobbly letters. A figure labelled Mommy, the strong one. A yellow blob labelled Sun, my friend. And at the end, newest, slightly crooked, Kang Shi, the lonely man who is not lonely anymore. He stood in front of it for a long time. "She made that the day we got home from the hospital," Michelle said from behind him, quieter now. "I asked her why she called you lonely, and she said, because his eyes were empty, and then they weren't." A pause. "She's 5. I don't know where she gets it from." He turned around. She was standing close, closer than she'd probably intended, and neither of them moved immediately. "Your daughter," he said carefully, "is terrifying." Michelle smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. "I know. I made her. I'm very proud." Are you feeling this story? If it's touching your heart, hit that like button and subscribe. I promise you, this is just getting started. It happens slowly, and then all at once. The way these things do, he started finding reasons to pass through Mapo. She started not being surprised when he did. Mirabel adopted him with the total confidence of a child who has decided something and sees no reason to debate it. And she would save him snacks from her school lunch and present them with ceremony, and he would eat whatever slightly crushed thing she handed him without question. And Michelle would watch this and feel the wall around her heart developing cracks. He met her friends, the Nigerian women in her small community, Chisom and Blessing, who looked him up and looked him up again, and pulled Michelle aside to whisper things that made her laugh and wave them off. He took them all to dinner at a restaurant that required 6 weeks of reservation and pretended not to notice when Chizom photographed everything. He helped Mirabelle with a school project about animals and somehow ended up spending 4 hours on it, and the project got the highest mark in the class. And Mirabelle told everyone her uncle helped her, and Michelle had to sit down when she heard the word uncle. "She's calling you uncle," she told him on the phone that night. "I know. Does that bother you?" A pause that lasted long enough to be its own answer. "No," he said. "It doesn't bother me." She pressed her hand to her chest in her dark bedroom and stared at the ceiling. The twist came on a Tuesday, which is when life has a tendency to ambush you. A woman appeared at Michelle's workplace, tall, polished, Korean, the kind of beautiful that comes with money and knows it. She gave her name as Han So-yeon. She said she was a close personal friend of Kwon Kang's, and she had something that Michelle needed to hear. She laid a manila folder on Michelle's desk. Inside were photographs, Kang at events, at dinners, at what appeared to be family functions, with another woman, a Korean woman. And documents, an article, Korean text but with a translation note, about a formal arrangement between the Kwon family and the Han family, a business alliance that had been agreed upon years ago, to be sealed with a marriage between Kwon Kang and Han So-yeon herself. "He is promised to me," the woman said, her voice completely level. "What you are doing, whatever you think is happening, is embarrassing for everyone involved. You are a single mother from another country. His family will never accept you. His world will never accept you. And when the pressure comes, and it will come, he will choose his world. They always do." She picked up the folder. She smoothed her coat. She left. Michelle sat at her desk for a very long time. Then she called Chizom. "Don't do anything yet," Chizom said. "Ask him first. Hear him say it." But Michelle didn't call him. She went home, put Mirabelle to bed, and sat on her sofa in the dark, and something that had been opening in her slowly for months, quietly, carefully, began to close. When he came by 2 days later, she was polite, warm enough, but polite, the way she had been in the very beginning, before the cracks. He noticed within 5 minutes. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing. I'm just tired." "Michelle." He said her name the way he'd learned to say it. All 4 syllables, the way it was meant to be said, not clipped or anglicized. The way that always made her pause. "Something happened. Tell me." "A woman came to see me," she said. She kept her voice even. She told him what Han So-yeon had said. She put the information out there like a document on a table and watched his face. She had expected denial. She had expected smooth reassurance, the kind men practice. She did not expect the anger. His jaw went tight and his eyes went cold. Not cold toward her, she could see the difference. Cold the way a man looks when he finds out someone has touched something that belongs to him. He pulled out his phone, stood up, and made a call in Korean, short and clipped and very controlled, which somehow made it more frightening than shouting would have been. When he hung up, he sat back down. He was quiet for a moment, collecting himself. "The arrangement is something my father created," he said. 20 years ago. I rejected it when I was 22. I have not spoken to Han So-yeon in 3 years. She has no standing to say anything to you. His voice was careful now, deliberate. I need you to understand that she came to you because she is afraid. She saw something when she looked at you, and she felt fear. And that fear is not your problem to carry. Michelle looked at him. What did she see? The silence stretched between them. He held her gaze with the full weight of those dark eyes and said something she was not expecting. She saw that I look at you the way I have never looked at anyone in my life, and she was right to be afraid. The room was very quiet. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere above them, Mirabelle was asleep with her rabbit. Michelle's voice when it came was barely above a whisper. Kang. I am a Nigerian single mother living in a third-floor walk-up with a broken elevator. Your world, my world, he said firmly, is whatever I make it. I built everything I have from a foundation that was handed to me, and I have remade every part of it in my own image. Do not tell me what my world will accept. A pause, softer. Let me decide who I let in. She covered her face with her hands, not crying. She was not a quick crier. Just overwhelmed, just needing a moment behind her palms. He didn't touch her. He waited, because he had learned in all these months that she needed to arrive at her own decisions in her own time. And the worst thing you could do to Michelle Okafor was rush her. When she lowered her hands, her eyes were bright. She's not going to stop, Michelle said. Whoever she is, whatever she wants, she won't stop. I know, he said. And there are probably others. Your family, your world, as you call it. Yes. And you're telling me you don't care. He looked at her steadily. I'm telling you that I have spent 38 years caring about everything except the right things. I am extremely tired of it. A sound from the hallway. Small feet. Mirabelle appeared in the doorway, blinking sleepily, clutching her rabbit, her hair loose around her face. Kang-shi? She said, as if his presence at this hour needed confirming. I'm here, he said. She padded across the room and climbed into the space between them on the sofa, settled herself with the certainty of a child who belongs exactly where she is, and closed her eyes again. He and Michelle looked at each other over the top of her small, sleeping head. And something passed between them in that look. Something that didn't have words and didn't need them. But the storm was already coming, and it was bigger than Han Soyeon. What Michelle didn't know, what Kang was about to discover, was that Soyeon had not acted alone. Behind her was someone with far more power and far more to lose. Someone who had spent decades building leverage over the Jang name and had watched with increasing alarm as Kang moved further and further from the orbit they had designed for him. Park Do-hyun, his father's oldest ally. The man who controlled 3 of the 7 board seats of the Jang group through his own proxies. The man who had survived every transition of Jang power by knowing where the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. He had allowed Kang to build and grow because a growing empire meant more for everyone. But a Jang who stopped being controllable? That was a different problem. And nothing made a man uncontrollable quite like someone he was willing to burn everything for. Park Do-hyun had been watching Michelle for weeks. He had files. He had people. And he had a plan that went far beyond sending an ex-fiancé to deliver a warning. The next move came fast and came hard. A story appeared in one of Seoul's largest gossip publications. Anonymous source, photographs, a narrative carefully crafted to look like concern and read like a knife. The headline translated roughly to, Jang Chairman's Foreign Affair. Who is the woman, and what does she want from him? The article implied she was a gold digger. It found her immigration records somehow, implied instability, questioned whether her daughter's presence was being used as manipulation. It was professional character assassination dressed in the language of public interest. Michelle found out when Chisom texted her a link at 7 in the morning. She sat with her coffee and read it 3 times and felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not shock. She had always known this kind of thing was possible. But the reality of it, the specific cruelty of it, the way they had taken her struggle and turned it into evidence of scheming, that landed somewhere deep and painful. She called Kang. He picked up on the first ring. "I've seen it," he said before she could speak. "Kang, I need you to do nothing. I need you to stay home today with Mirabelle. Can you do that?" Her voice tightened. "I don't run." "I know. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to stay safe while I dismantle the person who did this." A pause, then quietly, "How bad is it going to get?" He was quiet for a moment in a way that told her everything. "It was never going to be easy," he said finally. "You knew that. I knew that. But I need you to know something, Michelle. I need you to know that whatever comes, I am not moving. Not from this, not from you, not from her." He paused. "Are you hearing me?" She closed her eyes. Outside her window, Seoul was waking up, loud and bright and indifferent. Inside, her daughter was singing something in the kitchen, her small voice carrying through the walls. "I hear you," she said. "Good." And then, like it was the simplest thing in the world, he said, "I'll handle it. Trust me." She had not trusted anyone with anything in a very long time. She sat with that reality for a moment, the terrifying, impossible, wonderful reality of it. "Okay," she said. "Okay." What happened next would shake the foundations of the Kwon Group and expose a conspiracy that went back further than anyone knew. What Park Do-hyun had hidden. What he had done to Kang's father. The truth that Kang had been circling for years without knowing what he was looking for. And at the center of all of it, without meaning to, with nothing more than a pair of curious eyes and a question asked on a cold Seoul sidewalk, a little girl had started something that could not be stopped. Mirabelle was in the kitchen making her cereal, singing her song, completely unbothered by the forces assembling against her small, warm world. Because she was 5, and she believed, with everything in her, that Kang-shi was going to be okay, and her mummy was strong, and good things were coming. She had decided this, and Mirabelle, as Michelle would tell you, was never wrong about people. Kang sat in his car outside the building where Park Do-hyun's offices were, and he thought about a little girl in 2 messy hair puffs, standing on a cold sidewalk, reaching up to tug his sleeve and ask a question that had pulled him back from the edge of a life he had been sleepwalking through. "Do you want me?" What a question. What a devastating, perfect question. He got out of the car. Yes, he thought, he wanted all of it. The small apartment and the broken elevator and the wall of drawings and the 4 syllables of her name and the child who had handed him his heart in a plastic cup and called him General. He wanted it more than he had wanted anything in his carefully armoured life. And Kwon Kang, when he decided he wanted something, did not stop. And that, my loves, is where we have to pause. Because what happens next, what Kang finds in Park Do-hyun's files, what secret connects their families, what choice Michelle has to make when the full weight of his world lands on her door, and what Mirabelle does that stops everyone in their tracks one more time, that is a story for part 2. If this story moved something in you today, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Share it with someone who loves a story that feels like it could be real. Because love like this, messy, cross-world, inconvenient, stubborn love, that is always real, somewhere. We'll see you in part 2.